Cool, thanks a lot. Hey everyone, welcome to All Core Devs 178, first All Core Devs of 2024. Happy New Year's, everybody. Hope you guys had a good holidays. First thing on the agenda is Denkun updates. I know that this wasn't listed on the agenda, but I just want to check if anything happened over the holidays. I know DevNet 12 has been up. Is there anything around that we want to talk about before we talk about timelines?
Don't think we tried any specific tests over the holidays, so we were just keeping notes up, and if a client team has something updated, we just updated them.
Right on. Okay, with that, Marius wants an update from Prism. Marius, what exactly are you looking for here?
I don't know. Last time, I don't think anyone from Prism was there. And since Prism was the one client that was kind of delaying stuff, it would be really nice to know how they are progressing and if they think everything is fine now or if they need more time.
Yeah, I can give a brief update. Next week we'll do a Goerli release, but this will be a pre-release, meaning that we wouldn't recommend you using this Goerli release for mainnet, and separately we will also have a mainnet release. So right now we're decoupled because right now we wouldn't recommend our latest block feature to be to be part of the mainnet release. So I think basically, I think we're okay with the Goerli timeline, but I think like we're too early to setting the Sepolia and the host key one. Having them 1 week apart is like kind of crazy because it's definitely harder to change later if something Goerli goes wrong, because then you have to do a very like immediate client release to change the data again. So we wouldn't recommend setting the host key and the Sepolia for day right now.
Okay, that kind of leads us into the next topic point, but I just want to confirm with everyone that we are good with the Goerli date that we agreed on in the last All Core Devs, which is Jan 17, 6:32 UTC, meaning clients would want to release sometime next week. Is that still what we're expecting to do?
I think Guess is fine with that.
Lutzra is good with it.
So for Lighthouse, we've got all the neb changes done and merged. I'm not positive we'll be able to release next week because we've also got a lot of networking changes that we're still testing. But if not, I think we could do a pre-release similar to Prism. Yeah.
For Teku, we're planning to release Monday or Tuesday next week.
Besu is here. We're going to be releasing end of this week. We just had to put out the fork hashes.
Okay, great. Yeah, it sounds like we're all in agreement on that fork time. I don't have the epoch right in front of me, but it's out there. So on to the next two testnets, Sepolia and Haleshki. We last meeting discussed some days and there was some agreement, but now it sounds like there's a little bit less confidence in those specific days. Tem went ahead and came up with epochs on those days to try and agree on, but it sounds like we're not 100% confident on what days we want to do those forks are. So maybe we start with Sepolia. Sepolia is scheduled for January 30th. That's almost 2 weeks after the Goerli hard fork. Is that the day that we still feel okay with? I mean, obviously we can't foresee the future. If something actually falls apart on Goerli, then we'll have to rethink that. But in the optimistic case, is that a date that we can just go ahead and lock in? POTUS?
Yeah, so I feel that it'll be much safer since there seems to be sort of like an interest in shipping the actual mainnet as soon as possible. It seems to me that it'll be healthier if we don't schedule the next testnets and we schedule them very soon after Goerli if everything goes fine. But sort of like having the back of our head, if everything goes fine, it's gonna be around these dates, but try not to commit to dates now because things might not really go fine with Goerli. And going back from that is a problem. Like adding a new release with the right epoch with no changes is easy, but removing a release and fixing bugs is a problem, and it takes much longer than a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that you probably wouldn't release until the week before. But how do other client teams feel about that timeline, or what POTUS is saying?
So I generally feel pretty good about the timeline. I don't really get what this would like bring us to not say right now that this is going to be the date. The like clients can put out the release shortly before that anyway. So the only thing that this would like, and if something goes wrong, then like it's we have to break anyway. So we have to push the brake, pull the brake anyway. So like if this late in the process something goes very wrong, then we will have to delay anyway. So I don't see a point in not setting the dates now and just like have every client release on their schedule however they like.
Gajender, you're unmuted. Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, no, I basically am muted through my hardware mic. So,
Okay, I see. All good. Yeah. POTUS is saying if we set the dates now and something goes wrong, we will definitely need to re-release on the rush. Yeah, I think that Perry is right here. Marius is saying that we don't necessarily have to release, like we're not going to release next week with all of the forks, the testnet fork schedules. I think the idea is that we would release them as we gain confidence in the rollout. Is that not something that clients feel like they're able to do? So if we do move forward with Jan 17 Goerli and then Jan 30 Sepolia, that means we'd have about 1 week-ish to see if the rollout in Goerli is working as expected. And if it is, we can go ahead and do that release, 7 to 5 days before the Sepolia fork and allow the people that time to upgrade their clients. Do clients agree or disagree with that timeline?
I think the timeline makes sense. And we could say like January 30 is like a tentative date. And then
Sure.
after we see how Goerli goes, then we're setting the date.
POTUS?
Yeah, so these numbers are, we release Goerli, we test for a week or so, then we make a release, I guess, without soaking, just adding the fork for Sepolia, and that gives teams to update their Sepolia validators for just 1 week. So it seems to me that this schedule will just remove the soaking of clients, which presumably is fine if everything goes perfect, because there presumably won't be changes. But if there's any changes, then teams are not going to be able to soak them.
Well, I guess if there's changes, we wouldn't fork on that date, right? Because nothing has been released.
Oh, there's regular changes that don't need to be urgent or anything. But the thing is that whatever we release for Goerli, we are gonna have to take the same release candidate for Sepolia, and not make a new release, cut the new release from the develop branch or main branch or whatever branch you're using that continue to advance, because those changes are not going to be tested.
I'd make the case that we have to test those changes in the subsequent testnet. Otherwise, we make a release for mainnet, and the mainnet changes haven't been tested anywhere.
And that's my point, that we're going to be shipping something without soaking.
But isn't that always the issue? I mean, every fork we have shipped with changes that were tested at the last.
That has never been an issue. We always have had at least 1 week to soak before cutting a release for the next testnet or the next mainnet.
Is the proposal not to have a week to soak though? Like I'm saying, you don't need to create your release until around the 24th of January. That's would be 1 week after the 17th hard fork.
Right, but if you cut after 1 week from Goerli, you cut your release candidate, then so that means on the 24th. To actually release it, you need to have it soak in a few days. And that means that there's no time to actually test to deploy it for the people that are actually running validators.
So you mean
I think the 2 weeks is just too close. That's what I'm pointing out.
So you mean we would need 3 weeks between each testnet, basically, in order to have your process?
Well, I don't really mind the last two, Goerli and Goerli. I'm sorry, Goerli and Sepolia, but I think we do need 3 weeks after Goerli, because Goerli might go wrong.
Yeah, I don't like we always only had 2 weeks between testnets and then 3 or 4 weeks to mainnet. So I don't know. Like I see your point. I'm not sure if I agree though.
It feels a little bit like most client teams seem okay with 2 weeks. I know that Prism feels kind of strongly about going with something slightly longer. I don't know how strongly people have on their feelings for this.
We don't really feel very, very strongly about this. If Goerli goes fine, we're fine with deploying the same release. This is not something that I'm willing to die on a hill. And also, I'm not really sure if Prism feels like this. I myself am not comfortable with its dates that were set.
Understood. Ansgar?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say that this seems like basically a more general question, right? That we should figure out for future forks as well. And maybe for the future we could try and kind of have a more specified rollout plan for forks that we kind of discuss and agree upon, not right before we have a fork coming up, because I think now it's the unfortunate situation is that we basically have to make the decision today. But I think I would agree with Marius in principle that we should be hesitant with kind of keep extending the times between kind of first testnet fork and mainnet launch, just because usually that's in a way like a dead time anyway in terms of feature work, because we already have everything ready to go and we can't really work on the next fork either yet. So yeah, so I think if basically there's the desire to have a more kind of drawn out process, that's something we should probably then discuss some like when we have time and not right before hard fork.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to come up with a consistent fork pattern. I think also part of it is we wanted to ship this in the fall of last year. So now we're really trying to make it happen. And I think we're picking a little bit more aggressive timelines than had this conversation been happening in like October. I think we would have been a little bit more okay with stretching things out. But, yeah, we want to get this fork shipped Perry in the chat has proposed or kind of reproposed what we had already talked about, which is the 17th of January fork early, 30th of January optimistically fork. Or sorry, is that still, you're saying release in the week of the 29th with the expectation of optimistic target 30th?
Yeah, but I think that's way too close. So if we're going with that timeline, we would go with the assumption that Sepolia is being delayed by at least a week or two. Because if we are shipping Goerli on the 17th and we need at least a week to analyze stuff, then 25th is the earliest where we can say, okay, Goerli has gone well or has not gone well. Let's assume it did go well, then we can commit to making a release on the week of the 29th, which means we've already passed the 30th deadline for Sepolia.
So what I would really like to prevent is for us to have to go to another all-core dev to confirm the dates. I think like all-core devs is it's usually on a Thursday. Thursday now. And so afterwards we cannot cut a release because it's like the weekend already. So the next like possible day to cut the release is like the next Monday. So what I would prefer is if we would say, okay, these are the dates. If everything goes right, everyone will cut a release in the week of on the all core dev call, and on the 25th, and not have this and then we can discuss on all core dev if actually something really bad came up, and then we can still stop it. But I would just really like I would hate to go on to another all core dev call just to say, okay, Sepolia is go now, and now we have another 2 weeks to wait until we can actually do Sepolia.
Yeah, but coming to Potus's point, that would basically mean from the 17th till, let's say, even if we do stuff over the weekend, the 21st, that gives us about a 4 to 5 day timeline with the weekend where we have to find everything that's realistically wrong with Goerli.
No, we have all the time to discuss and to find stuff. Like we can always just say, we can always just say,
Monday,
don't cut the
people would start
release.
making releases, right?
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, okay. I guess we have to switch to async then.
Yeah, we can always say, okay, this is just like we will deprecate this release, or we will just say we will remove the fork date or push the fork date or whatever. Like if this is before mainnet release, I would also be more hesitant to say, okay, we can just like move the mainnet release in the last 2 days before it ships. But for testnets, I don't think it's too bad.
Guillaume?
Yeah, I mean, would it be possible to just agree on 2 sets of releases, two sets of dates, those that happen if everything goes well, and if something goes wrong, you immediately make the release, like you don't have to go through a CD. You just say something happened on Goerli, so the protocol is we move to the other set of dates, you just make the new release, and that's it. No need to discuss dates again on a CD and do the delay that Marius was talking about.
I just think that if something goes wrong, it's hard to be able to just unilaterally say this is the next date that we should do. Like we're probably just going to have to discuss, and depending on what went wrong, I mean, as Ansgar is saying, we need to figure out how much time it's going to take to fix, how much time we need to continue reviewing. So I think coming up with an optimistic date for assuming things continue to go correctly, we ship the forks on these dates is like what we're trying to do. And if something goes wrong, then I kind of think we have to revisit the conversation a bit.
Yeah, I meant more like if something goes wrong, like there's a couple bug fixes that are quite light, but yeah, of course, if there's a major bug that gets uncovered, then all bets are off. All bets are off, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, okay, just trying to avoid the bike shedding a bit. Like it's fine by me. Honestly, I don't care if it's an extra week. If we just push, we just add an extra week between Goerli and the next testnet. But yeah, if it can save some discussion, and I would rather do this, and hope.
Yeah. It's sounding a little bit like client teams are wavering a bit on the Jan 30 date. Am I understanding this correctly, or are people kind of also open now to maybe having that 1 week later or 5-ish days later? So that would be early, that would either be late in that week of the 29th, February 1 maybe, or early in the week of February 5th, so February 6, 7. That would be for the Sepolia. Or do we just want to move with the January 30th? Mario says January 30th, okay.
Basically fine with 30th too. We're good to go. I'm a little more compelled by the sidebar conversation that's happening in the chat, but we can maybe put a agenda item on for
that. Yeah, Dan brought it up. It's related to like the blob expiration. So like, do we want to wait long enough to observe blobs expiring and the implications of that on a testnet before forking the next testnet?
I think can I add a little something to the question, Matt? I think we also want to, I think apps and L2s might want to go through that as well.
Yeah, I mean, does any client team feel strongly that we need to see this happen before moving to the next testnet? My 2 cents is that we're going to see it happen on the testnets before mainnet, and that's really the big thing that we want to see. But I'm curious to hear other perspectives.
Yeah, I kind of also think it's not really worth waiting between each testnet that long, but it might be justification for waiting longer between the last testnet and mainnet.
Okay, so you're saying you might want to see on Haleshki the blobs expire before moving to mainnet? Or any testnet?
Definitely any testnet. Yeah, I'm not sure it would really make a difference with Haleshki, but with like between testnets, I mean, but yeah.
Yeah.
Most probably Sepolia, right? I think most teams have deployed either Goerli or Sepolia, not that much on Haleshki. And since Sepolia is supposed to be the stable one, I'd expect that we ship mainnet after we tested availability and expiry on Sepolia.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's keep that in mind when we're thinking about the mainnet fork date, but we're, not out of the woods yet. Tim posed a epoch for the Sepolia fork. We kind of agreed January 30th, begrudgingly. Can we just get a thumbs up on the epoch that was in the PR, 132608? That's okay for everyone? That's 2251 UTC on the 30th. I see a thumbs from Besu. And Geth. I'll assume the silence is agreement from the other clients. Okay, Sepolia, we have some agreement on January 30th on that epoch. Haleshki, the proposed date is the 7th of February. I'm guessing people want to push that back 1 week. Is anyone in favor of doing that, or would rather keep with the more aggressive timeline of giving 1 week between Sepolia and Haleshki? Rath is okay with a week? 1 week is good? Fantastic. All right, well, let's stick with the 7th of February then. The epoch that Tim proposed is 29,696. That's 11:34 UTC on Feb 7. Any last comments on the fork scheduling, or should we just put that into a box and put a bow on it and ship the releases? Great. That's awesome. Any last Denkun questions or comments before we open up the next fork for discussion? Cool. So the next agenda item is the Prague-Electra hard fork, Pectra. And in the agenda, we have a link to the ETH Magicians Forum, which is a bunch of proposals that people would like to see in the next execution layer hard fork. I don't know how you guys would like to go through this, but I think it might be useful to answer the question of what is our vision for the next hard fork in the first place before we just rattle off 10 or 20 ETH proposals. So I know that there's been a lot of discussion about should we do Verkle in this next fork, or should we have a smaller fork with some of these EIPs that people are really requesting right now? Do any client teams have a perspective on a smaller EVM fork this year, or do teams feel that we should really lean into Verkle and make that the main priority and not ship another fork until Verkle is ready?
So my personal, I'm sorry.
Oh, Mario, sorry. Go ahead.
My personal opinion is that we should focus on Verkle and not ship anything in between, because just the scheduling and the discussions will take up so much time, because everyone, like, if we start opening this can of worms, then everyone will start lobbying and pushing for the EIPs to go through. Two small caveats with this. One is that I would like to have get a more concrete overview of the progress of Verkle. And the second thing that I think we should also take into consideration is what's happening on the consensus layer. I went through all the EIPs that were proposed, and there are some that I would like to see on the execution layer eventually, but there are none that I would say this is high priority, super urgent. But I think there might be some on the consensus layer. So I think it's important for the consensus layer folks to discuss whether it would make sense for them to have a hard fork with those changes, and if that can be done without involvement of the EL, or whether it needs involvement of the EL, and we would need to do a joint hard fork anyway, and then I would be okay with having a smaller hard fork. So highest priority is Verkle, definitely, and we should push for it, but with these two caveats.
Understood. Thanks, Marius. Lucas?
So my experience tells me that state redesigns are extremely hard and they take extremely long time. So for example, Geth delivering flat layout took a few years, so we are working on our flat layout for over a year, and it will take at least another half a year to deliver it, or at least few months to deliver it properly. So while I think Verkle is great and it's doing great progress, I think if we just focus on Verkle, it would take at least a year for the next hard fork or even more. So my proposition would be to potentially focus on some smaller hard fork, while each team would commit to Verkle and assign appropriate resources, appropriate workforce, brain power, however you want to call it, to this topic. So we can have similar situations as with withdrawals and 4844, that we are working in the background on it and like working really, really in a concrete, deliberate way. Yeah, so that's in my opinion minimizes risks of just stalling for over a year while having the greatest potential to move Verkle as quick as possible.
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, I one of my concerns, and I'm curious to hear about how teams view this, is that it's going to be difficult to have a small fork and keep a lot of team bandwidth towards Verkle. That's my guess. As people are commenting, I would like to hear your perspectives on that. But I also just wanted to mention that this isn't necessarily something we're going to decide today. We're really just starting the discussion, so don't feel like we're going to make the decision now. Guillaume, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so trying to unpack stuff that has been said. So yes, updates. There are updates being provided. There's Verkle.info if you want to know a bit about the current state, and also Josh Rudolph is making regular updates on Twitter. So if you want something to help you decide, there are some resources. And also, we agreed with Tim that we will make another, like the third, I think by now, presentation about the current state of Verkle, but that will be either end of January or start of February. I don't remember. So there's that. But when it comes to the question proper, yeah, I also think there's no such thing as a small fork. I mean, if we could, for example, commit to only do the BLS precompile, for example, I think that'd be fine, because this has already been considered for a fork in the past, so it should be ready enough. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, otherwise, don't fool yourself. That will not be a small fork. And we still have the problem that all that data needs to be translated. So the more we wait, the worse it gets. So I would caution against scheduling another fork in between. There needs to be a lot of attention, and that also addresses what Łukasz has said. Yes, there's a lot of clients have to redesign their database. I mean, Geth is still working on some backend things that will affect the way Verkle is implemented. So it is a pretty heavy fork. It needs a lot of attention from client teams. This being said, I think every client team except maybe Reth, and even them, I think, are looking into it. So everybody's looking into it. Everybody's working on it. So I wouldn't expect any surprises in this respect. I think everybody knows what's coming. Everybody realizes that this is the thing they need to work on. So I don't really have any worries about the timeline proper, assuming everybody takes the fork seriously and starts investing more resources in it.
Makes sense. Thanks, Guillaume. Tomas?
I feel that being ambitious at this stage is better, and being cautious later might be fine, which means take a big lead vehicle for the next fork, but also be ambitious more and include things that are very important for staking. So it'll be important for the network. There are things like 702, there is 7251. Just will be very much welcome and support all our efforts for handling restaking, liquid staking, and any regulatory issues around operators for validators. Also, I would say pick one model for the account abstraction support. So go for all of this and take advantage of the team's capacity in the year where we have to show that we handle our biggest challenges. If vehicles end up showing to the teams that there's more and more difficulties piling up by March, then maybe we'll just ask this question once again and say, okay, vehicle drops, but then we stay with a pretty good set of other EIPs that we'll include.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one concern of having the ability to constantly open this debate, you can never permanently close it, but if this is really an 18 to 24 month project and we're committing ourselves because this is something that we believe is important to do for the network, if we just have that in the back of our mind, we could just take a break and spend 6-12 months shipping another fork. I think it'll be difficult to motivate client teams, to motivate people to stay focused on this for the longer haul. So I would be worried about opening these debates back up. But I think coming to a conclusive decision is going to be challenging. Ansgar?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in my mind, basically, given that Verkle is an EL side only change, it makes a lot of sense to at least kind of basically when we think about the next set of CL changes, that we don't commit to combining both of them and basically having that be the next fork. And I think in the chat also a lot of people have the same sentiment, so that we basically at least have we plan them as independent forks, and if Verkle goes really quick, then we just combine them and ship them at the same time. But if Verkle, like 6 months from now, Verkle is still nowhere near ready, then we could just start to roll out the kind of the next CL side fork. And then as part of that, I personally, but I'm not sure if that is majority kind of consensus, I personally would very strongly also want us to not pre-commit to Verkle being definitely the next thing on the EL side. If we basically think of it like a separate CL and a separate EL fork, then I think we should at least be open that, say, in 6 months, if Verkle still looks very far out, that we say, okay, hey, the set of CL features, we actually add a few small EL side features and make it a proper hard fork. But I think basically thinking of them as like a separate EL and CL workflow for the next fork, I think that's very productive.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I do think that we need to have confidence, at least today, or not necessarily today, but we need to make a decision and move towards that. And if in 6 months we have to revisit it, we have to revisit it. But I don't think that we should sit in some halfway out point and say, this is kind of what we're working on, but maybe we'll do something different. Like to ship Verkle, we're going to have a lot of focus and attention from client teams, which isn't going to come unless we say this is what we're doing. Andrew?
I'd like to say that I totally support Verkle, and I think for Aragon it's the easiest because we've already transitioned to the flat data model. But I kind of think because some other clients might like what Lucas said, that some other clients might need time to redesign their data models, and I'm thinking that a smaller, more isolated fork before Verkle makes sense tactically. Because if you consider things like EOF or the BLS precompile, it might be a kind of a complicated change, say EOF, but it is an isolated change. So you need maybe 1 or 2 people looking deeply into it, but it doesn't touch like the entire code base, right? So you can only have a couple people implementing, say, EOF, provided that the spec is ready. So Yeah, to my mind, EOF or BLS precompile makes sense as a tactical fork.
So just to confirm, your perspective is it's better to ship the smaller fork and kind of in parallel also have the people working on Verkle continue and ramp up on Verkle.
Right. Yeah. So absolutely, we should like Verkle should be our main focus, and I mean, if we decide that Verkle will be in the next fork, I'm fine with it. Like for Aragon, it's relatively easy. But I'm just saying, if we decide that Verkle will happen slightly later, then maybe we can, like the client teams can allocate 1 or 2 people to work on more isolated things. But Verkle should be the main focus.
Got it. Guillaume, you're back up.
Yeah, I mostly agree with what Andrew and others before him said. I'm perfectly fine with giving priority to Verkle, and if it turns out it takes longer than expected, we come up with a temporary, well, not temporary, but a smaller fork in between. That's totally fine. One thing I wanted to add, because I think there might be a misunderstanding. Verkle is on the scale of the merge, if not worse, in terms of complexity. So yeah, you cannot really ship anything at the same time on the EL side. But I had the discussion with Tim in Istanbul, and we were talking about pushing DAS at the same time. So when I said the same time, it's actually in the same release, but not necessarily activated at the same time. So it's not like we're holding everything back for Verkle. We're only holding EL back for, like, all other EL changes back for Verkle. So that's the first point. When it comes to EOF, that's I mean, I've supported EOF. I mean, I still support it. I think it does change a lot more than Andrew seems to think, all over the code base, and it does increase the complexity of Verkle itself, unless we could somehow convert every single contract out there to EOF. Then it actually makes things simpler. But I would not consider EOF small enough to make it into a fork that goes before Verkle.
Got it. POTUS?
Yeah, I just wanted to reply to Marius and Ansgar that made some points about like decoupling CL forks from EL forks. And while this sounds like interesting in theory, in practice, it's kind of useless, at least in this case. From the list of changes that you see for the coming fork, there's only one minor change that is in the original list, in the first list on this, that is purely CL, which is removing an attestation index, a committee index from the attestation. And all the other changes, even those that look like they will be only CL, like increasing the max EB, they depend on other changes that are from the EL. So I think pure CL forks are not going to happen. At least I don't envision them happening, not this year, not the next year. We don't have enough proposals that are purely CL. So we will always need changes from the EL in whatever CL fork we propose. Having said so, I do agree with Andrew that since this fork, and Ansgar mentioned this, Verkle is purely EL. So if we are committing to Verkle in 18 months, we're going to have CL teams that can work in parallel in whatever changes are majorly CL. And there are some changes that require small components from the EL. It wouldn't be nice to, since Verkle would just delay those EL changes, it wouldn't be nice to delay those forks that would be mainly CL. So I think we can ship smallish forks on the EL side that are mainly CL in the timeline that you're working on Verkle.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Just very quickly, did any EL teams disagree with that sentiment from POTUS? or does that seem fair?
So what's the one-liner?
Yeah, I mean the DAS is a good example. It's the EL is checking the blob gas limit, but adding that to a fork, a bit more than one line, but still relatively straightforward.
Is one like triggerable exits is something that is mainly.
That's not really a simple change for the execution layer, though. Ansgar?
Yeah, I mean, I just was going to plus one this and say that I think basically, clearly, it doesn't make sense to have the distinction of like literally CL side only and EL side only changes. Like we probably still have a client release on the other side as well. But that basically we use it as a shelling fence, right? So the problem is always with forks, once we open them up at all, then everyone wants to get in. So if we have the shelling fence of saying, hey, this is a CL fork, so you can only get in if your EIP is like 90% on the CL side. And if you need like one constant change or one small thing here, then at least we can talk about it, But basically, I think that having the shelling fence of a clear theme of a fork is super, super important.
Radek? Oops. Tomas?
Yeah, I agree with the insights that those changes related to staking, the ones that have CL will be driven very much by the project management structure on the consensus calls, while the execution layer clients may have the Verkle as the main driver, because on the testing side, Verkle trees will be the ones that will cause the most of the headache to testers on the execution layer. For the consensus layer testing, everything that is like execution layer triggerable exits, it might be feeling slightly complex to implement on the execution layer, but I don't think it will create the same level of interdependencies between the changes that are in the execution layer. You'll test them very much independently, and then there'll be a bit more burden on testing of consensus layer. It's a different thing if you want to do both Verkle trees and say account abstraction support. But I think that you should still opt for both, because if Verkle trees indeed ends up being a 18 months project, I think the account abstraction will be something that will happily ship within the next 6 to 12 months.
Radek?
Hi guys. Basically, I can confirm what Andrew said, that from the Epsilon team, the EOF specification is ready, and we've been discussing it a lot with the clients and language teams. So basically, I would support the EOF to be introduced or start being introducing already as soon as possible. Of course, workers are very important, but not sure if we can say that the specification of the workers are as ready as EOF already is. I wouldn't say that EOF is such a big change, especially for the execution client, and I think it's a matter of just understanding what really is happening there, and it's very separated, as also Andrew mentioned. So I would support EOF, and of course, in the meantime, just finishing specification of the Verkles.
What specifications are not ready in Verkle exactly?
I'm just asking if we can say that specification of the Verkle trees are ready. So this is just a question. Not sure if it can be say about this. It can be say for Verkles, but for sure for EOF it is ready.
I mean, I would say they're as ready as they are for EOF, i.e., everything, like when it will land into the backlog or of every team out there, it will be up for discussions again. Can you say any of them are ready? No, but I don't see the Verkle specification being less ready than.
Okay, if you say so. As I said, it's just a question here for you.
Let's not get too sidetracked down the readiness road. I would do want to kind of bring it back to that original question. I've sort of been keeping track of what client teams have been saying, but I wanted to hear. I don't know if I've specifically heard Besu or ETH.js. Do you guys have a preference on what to move forward with next? Again, like, we're not making this decision now. It's just trying to collect this information so we can mull over it for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, let me weigh in on Besu right now. So we're making progress on both fronts. You know, we're looking at what comes next with the whole driver and passengers plan. And I think we agree that EOF is definitely not a passenger. However, we've got a lot of progress on EOF for quite some time, actually. So, I mean, I would be very comfortable personally with EOF being the driver for the next one as we work on Verkle, because we are making a ton of progress on Verkle as well. And I don't see any of our team's remaining capacity being diminished by having to support EOF during the 18 months that we're forecasting out required for Verkle. Not a strong opinion, and a bit of a sunk cost fallacy at work, I'll admit. But that really seems for us kind of the ideal way to go.
Yeah, from my side, I would
Understood.
personally focus on Verkle.
Okay, got it. Great. So most teams seem to be leaning towards Verkle right now. Reth seems to be the most feature leaning team, and Nethermind and Besu also leaning a little bit with features, but pretty much everyone is okay with making Verkle the next big priority. I don't think it's the call to make this decision. Like, I think we're going to spend another couple calls debating it, but I did want to give some time to people who wanted to talk about their proposals for Prague if it's not Verkle, because I know some people have joined the call to discuss that, and just to add color to the whole discussion of, like, what are we missing out if we choose to go Verkle for the next 18 months. But before we move over for that, is there any last comments or questions with respect to Verkle as the main priority in the next fork?
Like I said, in my opinion, it's a very risky move to just focus on Verkle. But that's my understanding.
Georgios,
sorry. Yeah, just
sorry,
wanted
one
to know
second. Georgios, did I say that Reth was signaling support? I thought I said that you guys were leaning towards a feature fork.
My bad. Maybe I misunderstood, but wanted to clarify for avoidance of confusion.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Guillaume, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry for jumping out of order. No, I just wanted to understand why Łukasz was saying it's risky. Like, long I can understand, but why? What do you mean by risky?
Okay, so in order to just touching the state takes tremendous amount of work and testing every time. I've seen that happening. And while Verkle is already progressing, I still think that maybe, for example, Go implementation is closer to being production ready. But for example, Nevermind implementation, while quite feature rich at the moment, it's very unoptimized, and also, for example, depends on the transition for us, depends on delivering flat layout properly, which we haven't delivered yet. So there are multiple risks there for Nevermind.
Okay, thanks.
And optimization, for example, for the maths, we have some problem there. For example, if we use the existing libraries, which are fast and optimized, we have a problem of interoperability, the cost that because actually accumulates quite a lot. And if we tried to implement it in native C#, we were having issues with getting good performance. So there's a question what to do, unanswered question, and what to do with that. I'm not sure if Bezu, for example, doesn't have similar problem. Would be great to hear about it.
Yeah, Kareem is leading.
Yeah, Kareem is leading, and Only Dust are working pretty heavily on the Verkle implementation. But we're outside of the JVM for Verkle. We're using JNI and the Rust libraries for that.
Okay, so whole tree will be outside of JVM, or?
No, just like the IPA multipoint and any of the cryptographic implementations are in JNI.
Okay, and you don't have any problems for performance with that?
We're yet to fully join the testnet right now, so we'll have better numbers on it as we get join the testnet. But I don't think we've noticed like show-stopping performance issues yet.
Okay, testnet is already quite small, so not at least I think it is. I'm not sure if it will scale to mainnet levels without proper mainnet testing, like importing the whole mainnet into Verkle. It's really hard to say if the performance is there, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. Have other clients has Geth tried to import mainnet into the Verkle implementation and go?
Yes. Sorry, if the question was Geth, yes, we tried, and I'm currently working on the shadow fork to make it more reproducible, more frequently. So yeah, the performance of Go is fine, but yeah, other clients will discover that when they try to do the same thing.
Yeah, so my point is there's still a lot of unknowns. So if we commit to something, we might just not deliver it for a long time here. And I would still commit to it, but probably like with 4844, we committed to smaller fork first and doing this in the background for some time. So that's still my recommendation.
Okay, you're still recommending feature fork with high prioritization of Verkle in parallel.
Yes, that's my recommendation, because Verkle will take a long time either way. So if we don't prioritize Verkle, we won't deliver it in the next fort, for example. But if we do and it takes a long time, we don't deliver anything for that time, which is also bad.
Yep. Guillaume?
Yeah, just to give a tiny bit of pushback, I totally understand the position of Łukasz is reasonable. This being said, a lot of the development that has been done in Geth is being readapted to other clients. So, for example, Besu has been catching up really fast. Ethereum.js has been catching up really fast. Nimbus, I'm not so sure, but it seems to me that they are catching up fast. So it's not going to be as slow as it has been for Geth, because a lot of the questions have been solved by us. So yeah, I mean, it will take time for sure. I'm still not convinced it will take 18 months, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, Łukasz is right. If it does take a lot of time, there should be members of each team working on the feature fork.
I think we can probably close the discussion on Verkle for this call. We have so many more calls and time to discuss it, and I think it will come up again in the next call. In the next couple weeks, if you guys could spend a little bit of time discussing internally, Okay. Jamie, did you have something you want to say? Great. Yeah, if you guys could spend some time discussing internally what your team's stance on Verkle is, I think that's going to be useful for the next couple calls. POTUS?
Yeah, not related to Verkle, but something that came up last fork was that when the Ethereum Magicians post went up, BLS precompile was something that everyone said, I want this in this fork, I want this in this fork, and then it never happened. When we asked on ACD channel why this didn't happen, the reply was essentially, well, just inertia. And I feel if you go and read that, because it's not always the same set of crowd that write on the Magician forum than what come here and voice their opinion on these meetings. If you go and read this chat now on the Ethereum Magician forums, you're going to see that 7002 is the most voted one and where people in the community are asking for it. So I wouldn't want to have the same situation as with the BLS precompile in the next fork because of the same reason.
Understood. I mean, that's a good segue. We've got some time left. I think we should give people the platform to discuss the proposals for Prague, if those people happen to be here. And yeah, hopefully try to convey like how much demand there is for these things from the community. So I think maybe the best way to do it is just to go down the list of proposals in the Magicians thread. And if there's a person on the call who feels that they can spend 30 seconds to 2 minutes summarizing and trying to create some momentum behind it, that could be useful. So the first one is 2537. Is anyone on the call here who wants to try to motivate a 2537 EAP in the next feature fork?
Yeah, I can. I think this is pretty well accepted, I think, by everyone here. So it's adding BLS arithmetic. This is a curve we use on the consensus layer, so it unlocks a lot of staking use cases inside the EVM, making staking pools more trustless. It also helps a lot with zero-knowledge cryptography. So if any of these snark applications want to use this curve in the EVM, it unlocks them. And then also that directly extends to ZK rollups as well. So yeah, this one should definitely go in my opinion, and would unlock many, many, many use cases.
In the interest of time, I think we can just go to the next ones unless someone has a very critical or strong feeling against the proposal. It might be useful for authors or people interested in the EIP going in to spend some time addressing that feedback. So any strong feelings against?
One quick thing. I think this proposes 8 new precompiles or 6 new precompiles. And most of them are not really useful for staking related stuff. I think only the verification, basically the verification is useful for that. But most of the others are useful for L2 stuff, as far as I understood it. But it would be really nice if we could get a document outlining the need for every one of those. Why should we not just add one, but why should we add like all of this 5 or 8 or whatever precompiles?
Sure. Next on the list is EOF. Anyone on the call want to make the case for EOF?
I'd like to just reiterate from Base's perspective that we're looking at this, that it's very close to done, and we're here to ship it, and a lot of work's been spent on it. But I don't have any additional community perspective on the interest or need for it that I can bring.
Thanks. Ansgar?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say I don't have myself a super strong opinion, but I did talk in Istanbul, for example, with some members of the Solidity team, and they were expressing pretty strong opinions in favor of EOF. I'm not sure if that was representative of the entire team, but I think there's a little bit of a risk that EOF might be another one of these features. Say, if we think back to 3074 from 2 years ago, where I think a lot of the community was really excited about it, but because that excitement didn't quite get to ACD, it never moved forward. And I think EOF might be in a somewhat similar spot where there's a lot of more application side teams and people that actually, or like say in this case on the language, on the programming language side, that would actually really like it, and that those are just the kind of people that don't usually come to ACD. So maybe there could be some value in outreach to try and get them on the call.
Yeah, that's fair. I also talked with the Solidity team in Istanbul and can echo that sentiment. Does anyone have any very strong negative reaction to EOF, or feel like EOF is not something that we should be putting into a fork? Okay. So next up is 7002, the alleged #1 voted EIP for the next hard fork. Does anybody want to motivate a case for shipping 7002? Tomas.
Yeah, without 7002, we cannot really claim fully non-custodial staking in Ethereum, which means that any professional node operators have to use a bit of a trick to support withdrawals, which means that you always have the risk of griefing, have the capital provider who is staking not being able to withdraw without collaboration with the node operator. So the solution nowadays is maybe it's not really bad in a sense that the pre-signed transactions are offered, but 7002 is the way to go. And not only this, it also opens a lot of potential very important features related to safer restaking, like more aligned, like better represented actual security on the network versus security borrowed, and a few other things. Super important.
Yeah, that's a nice summary of it. Any strong pieces of feedback or negative thoughts on 7002? Okay, next on the list is Verkle, but I think we've already discussed Verkle quite a bit, so let's just go to the next one. This is a CL only one, 7549 move committee index outside attestation. Yeah, POTUS, do you want to motivate it?
That should definitely be in. It's a very, very simple change. We can do it on the CL side. It's trivial to implement, and it'll save a lot of aggregation time. It can help on like trustless bridges or ZK proving the ZK bridges. It's something that it should definitely be in whatever fork we do next.
And is this a CL only change? Or is there an EL component?
It's only a CL thing.
Okay.
It's just a bug in the design. We include a number in an attestation that, since it's signed, it prevents to aggregate different attestations with different of these numbers, which is the committee index of the attester. This removes this committee index outside of the attestation so that you can actually aggregate different committees' signatures.
Got it. Yeah, we'll leave that one to be more deeply discussed on the CL call. So next is EIP 3074. Is anyone on the call who wants to motivate a case for 3074 and a fork?
I can talk about it. So basically 3074 introduces two opcodes. One will authorize the smart contract to act on the behalf of the externally owned account. The second will call other contracts from this invoker contract, and when it will be like a delegate call, but for the EOA that authorized the invoker smart contract to do his bidding. The idea behind this EIP is to improve the user experience. So, for example, batching transaction would become way easier to do, even for EOAs. It will also pave the way for EIP 5003, which will basically allow us to convert EOA accounts into smart contract, enabling more account abstraction adoption. And also, it will remove some of the bad design decisions, like in ERC20, for example, approve and then the action. So, yeah, that's basically my summary of it.
Thanks, Ahmed. Tomas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I feel that some enshrined support for the account abstraction or like more smart accounts, whether it's 3074 or something much simpler like 7553 or anything else really that's proposed. One of those would be good to have as a target to deliver. And at the same time, maybe one thing that we didn't discuss, but solutions like these plus vertical trees are still very much bound to Ethereum L1 being seen mostly as a high transaction throughput user-oriented layer and not the on the scaling versus L2s. So the question is whether if all those changes, we want to show that we championing on L1, what should be the change direction, L2. But still, I think that's having all the implementations of the clients for those changes in the direction and research will be extremely important, even at some point we decide that they will only be bubbled up to L2s.
Thanks, Tomas. Andrew?
Yeah, I think there was an objection from our team against 3074 because it opens a security kind of worms. There is a change in security assumptions, and user assigns something that is lasting forever and can do arbitrary things that the user is not aware he's signing for. So permissions are not revocable. Things like that. I can look deeper into it, and I haven't looked into the EIP for a while, but I think there are big security questions against it.
Thanks, Andrew. Ansgar?
Yeah, so of course, as one of the EIP co-authors, I mean, I'm happy that it has a second kind of wind behind it now, but I have some concerns at least that we want to voice specifically kind of in the context of layer 1. I think with kind of now layer 2 being much more mature, it seems if there is demand for something like this, it would be a much better candidate to try out in the layer 2 context first via the RIP process. Specifically, I mean, 3074 was always more designed as a stopgap in between kind of EOAs that we have today and like the glorious actual account abstraction future with smart contract wallets that we'll hopefully get to in the future. And I think we are much closer to that future now, so there's less reason for it. And I would caution that I think a lot of people that are now supporting the EIP are somewhat unaware of the complexities that it brings with it. So specifically, the EIP requires this kind of concept of invokers, and all the functionality would have to be standardized by an invoker. So there have to be like one standard invoker for bundling, one standard invoker for, I don't know, like time invalidated transactions, all these kind of things. And that will take a long time to actually get these standards right. And while in principle they could be forward compatible with things like smart contract wallets and everything, that would require like a very strong big change to the way smart contract wallets work. So basically, instead of having their own bundle functionality, they would have to go through the invoker for bundling and everything. So I think basically before we were to even consider this for mainnet, we should basically get all the takes, we should basically have commitments from smart contract wallet implementers that they would actually also want to use this invoker design. We would have to actually see invoker implementations already proposed as ERCs. We would have to see tooling support for, like, say, Ethers.js and these people specifically for some of these invokers. I think otherwise it's just basically really naive, because we would ship this feature and then not have anything that could actually use it for the next 2 years afterwards.
Thanks, Hanskar. Let's go ahead and move on to the next, because we're only halfway through. So the next proposed one is 3068, precompile for BN256 hash to curve algorithms. Is anyone here who wants to support that? Going once, twice. All right, on to the next one. EIP 6110, supply validator deposits on chain. Anyone want to motivate the case for that EIP?
Hey, this is Justin here for Besu. I like the EIP, cleans up a little bit of tech debt, and again, we have an implementation.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, it is mostly a CL EIP. Marius, did you want to say something?
Yes, I can kind of motivate it. Right now, basically, CLs need to listen to EL receipts for finding out who deposited. And this means we need to keep all of the receipts for these events for the deposit contract. What this would enable us to do would be to also like lessen or lower the requirements for keeping historical receipts. So stuff like 4444 is kind of dependent on this because otherwise we cannot really with good conscience remove the receipts from post merge Ethereum. Only we can only remove the receipts from Genesis up to the start of the beacon chain. Otherwise, we would lose those deposit events. So yeah, I'm in favor of this.
Thanks, Marius. POTUS?
I think Dabline has his hand up, and he's most probably going to say the same as me.
Okay, Dabline.
Yeah, one of the biggest points is that we will get rid of very bad security assumptions that we had, because this is basically a breach. Now, an honest online node would not be convinced to process fake deposits, even if there is an adversarial majority. And that's kind of one of the last remaining bad things that we have pre-merge.
Yep, agreed. POTUS?
Yeah, just a quick comment is that the fork itself, so the change is not so bad, but the fork itself is a problem with this EIP. So it would depend a lot on what kind of fork we're looking at. If we're doing this on the verge, I wouldn't add this EIP at the same fork.
Got it. Next EAP on the list is 6913 set code instruction. Is anyone here who wants to make a case for that EAP?
I can make a case against it. I don't think it's feasible. Having like changing this the code of a smart contract is not great. We have one way to do it with create2 and self-destruct. This is not anymore. But yeah, so this has a lot of applications that would need to be tested. For example, setting code within a contract that just got set code. So doing set code in a loop, or doing sidecar recursively. It doesn't play well with basically anything. It doesn't play well with Worker. It doesn't play well with a lot of other proposals. So I don't think it's a good.
Thanks, Marius. We are running a little low on time, so if we can keep the comments pretty short, Tomas.
I second this against set code.
Thanks. Next up is increase code size limit to 2 to the 16. Anyone want to make a quick argument for or against? Tomas.
If we understand properly, it shouldn't be done without vertical trees done first.
That's currently my understanding. All right, next up, this is a CL only one. We're going to skip it. Next up after that is 7377 migration transaction. Is there anyone here who wants to make a case for that EIP?
Sure.
Gary.
Since I put that on the thread, I think that 7377 is a pretty elegant way to migrate EOAs on the roadmap for account abstraction. It's seems easy to reason about. It doesn't have a lot of baggage. It doesn't seem to have the same kind of security risks that auth and auth code have. It seems to me like it's a light touch fix for getting towards account abstraction.
Thanks for that, Gary. Sorry, I'm just starting to go a little bit faster so we could get through. There's just about 3 or 4 more, and we wanted to give some time for Ansgar to mention something about the RIPs. So next after that is EIP 4.4 is bound historical data. This is something that's been brought up again and again. I just want to see if anybody wants to make a quick motivating case for making that a priority soon. All right, there's some people in the chat saying it's useful, but we can discuss it more offline. We've got a handful of things happening from the CL GitHub issue that are pretty related to execution layer. Is anyone wanting to make a case for SSZ-ification of the transactions, withdrawals, and receipts?
I think SSZ-ification will add a lot of computational overhead because you need to do a lot of hashes for transactions. Right now, you only need to do one to get the transaction hash. With SSZ, you need, I don't know, like a lot. And so every transaction processing will get a lot worse. So I don't think it's very realistic right now.
Got it. Okay, that's from the list. We've completed it. Dragan. All right, that's the list. There's a couple other ones, 2 more that I wanted to bring up. Does anyone?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was muted.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, just
Very good.
Yeah. I just wanted to give a little bit more support for UF. In general, it's not just one AIP, it's a group of AIPs, from like static jobs to limited fabs to a lot of like small things that improve EVM in good way. So yeah, I just wanted to say a few words on that, nothing more.
Thanks for that. Does anyone want to make a motivating case for 7212, the R1 precompile on mainnet?
I haven't looked super closely into this, but it seems like that's going to enable a lot of account abstraction use cases, secure enclaves, mobile devices, things like that. It seems like for user experience, that's something that we want to get out there. it's as a precompile goes. I don't want to keep harping on basically as an implementation for this, but we have an R1 implementation already, so it would be not terribly difficult to get that out there.
Yep. And then last, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Could I just mention something on the code size limit? One of the issues with that is, I mean, it's quite low at 24K. I don't know if I'd go all the way up to 64K, but you know, maybe 32. But it does lead to developers making very strange contracts in order to get around it. You've got the diamond proxy and all sorts of various hoops, and people end up deploying multiple contracts when they've just gone over that limit, and it becomes a lot more complex with delegate calls, etc. So it's quite a UX problem.
Thanks, Ben. The last one that I wanted to give someone a chance to mention was the EIP 7553 draft separated payer transaction. Tomas, I think you wanted to discuss that one.
Yeah, so this is the EIP that goes like the simplest possible route to allow to separate the signature that is responsible for covering the gas payment and the signature that is authorizing execution on behalf of the account. This is alternative to any of the other proposals related to the account abstraction like or smart wallet like accounts. Which means that if we go with something like 3074, then 7553 doesn't really make that much more sense. But 7553 was proposed by me because in Ansgar because this is really much simpler change. It does still require wallet modifications, but if you see the spec, it doesn't try to be very generic. It doesn't try to solve many problems. It solves something that is very often mentioned as 80 or 90% of the reason for introducing any account abstraction is just to allow for payment for gas from another account or by some kind of paymaster. So 7553 just does this, nothing more. And when you think about it later, it just opens also a very nice route for replacing the actual signature that is being used for the authorization. So you can leave the standard signatures, the ones that we used to, for gas payments, making sure that our transaction pool is still safe. Okay, we don't have to risk invalidating the transaction pool, but we can change later the signatures responsible for the authorization for execution, which means that we can start creating some kind of account abstraction via smart contracts if that signature is dependent on the contract execution, because you already have promised to pay for that and you validated for that in transaction. So that's 7553.
Thanks, Tomas. We're at time. Charles, do you have a quick comment on that EAP?
I actually wanted to advocate for the payoff code. EIP, what is this, 15920, which was briefly considered for Cancun and wasn't rejected. It was postponed for, I guess, it's an EVM change, and I guess EVM changes that touch state can be a little complicated to implement. So I wanted to re-bring it up for inclusion in Prague.
All right, guys, we're at time. Ansgar did want to mention this EIP 7587, reserving the addresses 0x100 through 0x1ff address range for RIP precompiles. Ansgar, do you want to take a second to discuss that?
Yeah, I think Carl's also on the call. He would be better to talk about it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, sure. 7587, as discussed on the last ACD call, the idea is to reserve a set of precompile addresses for the RIP process, so we can start deploying precompiles like the R1 curve, as we were discussing earlier here. But in a way that we can ensure no conflicts between L1s and L2s. The EIP is exactly as we discussed last time, which is basically just reserving the second 256 addresses for the RIP process. The question I have is about assuming everyone's okay with this, how do we go ahead about formalizing this? It's an informational EIP, but like, can something like this be included in forks, or yeah, basically how do we turn it from this is something we're discussing and is nice into something that is we agree to abide by it or not moving forward? I don't know if anyone has any strong ideas on that.
It doesn't necessarily seem like something that needs to be quote unquote scheduled. It seems like we can just reserve it. We can talk offline like where to have that list, but maybe something like the execution specs after the EAP is accepted. But is anyone against reserving that address range for RIPs or have a comment on it? Okay, let's say this is the introduction of that EAP, and then we'll circle back to it in 2 weeks and try to confirm that and go ahead and move forward with it. If you guys have any questions or comments about that in the meantime, just go ahead and post on that ETH Magicians forum. For the precompile reservation EAP, and I think we can go ahead and close it out. Thanks so much for everybody being on their best behavior for the substitute teacher. Tim will be back again in 2 weeks for Alcor Dose 179, and we'll again talk about Verkle and all of our EAPs that we would like to see in the next fork. Happy New Year. Talk to you all later.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.